Argentina is going for a radical free market approach, and that will be judged on that in terms of what it achieves. And it's shaping up to be quite a good success story.
Trump always chickens out. He always pushes back the most damaging tariffs.
I think right now the default assumption in a lot of financial markets is they just don't believe the president. They don't think that he's actually going to do this. I think the fact that we didn't see a big market reaction, I think, is evidence of the taco trade like you were talking about.
From CapX, this is The Capitalist. I'm Marc Sidwell. My guests today are Dominic Pino from the National Review Institute in the US state of Virginia. He's also the host of the E-Conception podcast. And we're also joined by the journalist and CapX contributor Harry Phibbs. Trade between the US and EU could grind to a halt if Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose sweeping new tariffs. The European Union's Trade Commissioner says that proposed duties of 30% or more would make transatlantic commerce almost impossible, devastating supply chains and leaving industry leaders on both sides of the Atlantic in a state of alarm. The warning comes just days after Trump threatened the new tariffs from the 1st of August via a post on social media, a move that has unsettled Brussels and reportedly blindsided even his own negotiating team. Meanwhile, despite a trade deal between the US and UK last month, discussions over the new level of steel tariffs continue, even as we prepare for a state visit from the president in September. Dominic, markets seem to have rather recovered from the initial shock of Liberation Day when Trump launched his set of tariffs earlier in the year, and there have been new highs in the US markets quite recently. But that's also partly because of what's sometimes called, I think, the taco trade, the idea that Trump always chickens out. He always pushes back the most damaging tariffs. Is this new deadline of in August a sign of that? Do you think more of that, or is there a real risk that these new EU tariffs could actually happen?
New tariffs actually happen on this August deadline. I think you'll see the market tank again, just like we saw in April. I think right now the default assumption in a lot of financial markets is they just don't believe the president. They don't think that he's actually going to do this. I think what the fact that we didn't see a big market reaction, I think, is evidence of the taco trade like you were talking about. These tariffs have already been ruled illegal by a federal court here in the U.S. That appeals hearing, the oral arguments for the appeals trial are going to happen on July 31st. So right before that deadline is going to happen, that's when the attorneys are going to make their case in the appeals court. And then after that, if they rule against the administration again, you could see this case go to the Supreme Court after that. So that would probably happen sometime before the end of this year. But the fact that these stuff is going to be tangled up in court really is going to cause problems, because if they end up ultimately ruling that these tariffs are unconstitutional, they might rule that a lot of the revenue that's been raised has to be returned to people because it was taken from them illegally. I think that the lower court case is very well reasoned. I think it's a good argument that they make about the nature by which the president has done this. He is still relying on an emergency powers law that is based on a national emergency declaration over the existence of a trade deficit. That is the national emergency that is being claimed. The trade deficit that the United States has had since the mid-'70s is now apparently a national emergency. And quite frankly, if the president can just declare an emergency for an accounting statistic and then get unilateral power to impose whatever tariffs he wants, then we don't really have a constitution for the purposes of that anymore. I don't think the courts are going to allow that to happen. you could see some ideologically motivated judges, perhaps on the appeals court, make a bad argument for why that's the case, and try to make it, and it could become more politicized against Trump. The lower court decision was not very politicized at all. It hardly mentioned Trump at all. It was purely on the constitutional matter. I expect the Supreme Court will take a similar approach when analyzing this, even if they don't come to exactly the same conclusion. But the powers that the president is claiming here are not powers that actually exist in law. They are not consistent with the Constitution. And the fact that we now have a court ruling against them, I think, is part of the reason as well, in addition to the taco dynamic, that the markets are not taking this as seriously as they did the first time.
That's comforting to hear that the courts may be reining this in. But do you think there's a risk, too, that people are becoming complacent about the damage that these tariffs actually mean? I mean, Dominic, this is something that's clearly potentially very damaging indeed, but people have become sort of blasé to it. They seem to have accepted it as the new normal, and that seems a risk in itself.
I think that's right. One of the tests that I'm interested in seeing is the next time we have a Democratic president, are they going to roll all this back? Are they going to try to make the anti-Trump case against tariffs? Tariffs are still a superficially popular idea. If you actually look at polling on this, it's like nobody's number one issue, and so there's a lot of very unformed and loosely held opinions on this. It's not like there's this huge crowd of a majority of people crying out for tariffs. That's not what polling shows. But when you ask people about this, they'll either shrug or they might say, yeah, sure, I can see it in some cases, kind of a thing. But that's obviously not what Trump is doing. I mean, he's trying to put tariffs on basically every country in the world by mailing letters to foreign heads of state. That is not how tax policy is made. That is not how the Constitution says that this should be done. And I think most of the American people will understand that that's not that's not something they actually want. The fact that it hasn't been painful yet for a lot of people is still because of the lag in supply chains, the fact that businesses were stockpiling inventory in the earlier part of this year in order to sort of smooth some of this out. We're still very much in that phase before stuff really starts to cause problems. If these tariffs actually do go into effect on August 1st in these letters, like Trump says, then we'll start to see then there'll be a very, very different reaction.
Harry, I mean, there's some comfort there from Dominic about the fact that the worst of these threatened EU tariffs seem unlikely to materialize. So let's cross our fingers on that. But do you think this is bad for the UK in general if Trump is normalizing a sort of anti-free trade sort of approach in the world system? Because free trade's so important to the UK.
It's bad for the UK if the rest of the world does badly. I was comforted by what Dominic was saying. I mean, it's been bewildering for us, isn't it, to look at the way US policy has been conducted, and we get these tweets, or they're now called truth socials, I think, from Donald Trump, and it's so erratic. I mean, probably by the time this broadcast goes out, everything will be out of date because every few hours there's some sort of dramatic new, and it's as if he's sort of flicking a switch on or off with his imposing tariffs, he's postponing the tariffs, whatever. Whereas with the European Union, it's almost the opposite problem for that trade policy, that it takes them forever to come to a decision. The inertia and the bureaucracy and the lobbying and the vested interest means that you turn the kind of tanker round for them to sort anything out. I mean, as you know, I'm very strong free trader to the extent that I would just say we should just be unilateralists and just say we're going to be open trading, let the rest of the world do its worst. As far as we're concerned, we've got the self-confidence to trade openly with and freely with anybody who's willing to trade with us. But I also think, in a way, the political argument is getting stronger now. That there's something rather humiliating for the rest of the world about Donald Trump sends a tweet and then the rest of the world all has to dance around it. I think it's politically attractive for other countries to say, look, we don't care. Do whatever you like. As far as we're concerned, we want to trade with whoever else wants to trade with us. And the Vietnamese communists seem to show greater appreciation of this of Adam Smith's case for free trade. They was last week. They more or less seemed to. I mean, I know it was a sort of nominally a negotiated deal, and you always need to look at the small print. But as far as I could gather, the Vietnamese were saying, "Look, fine, we're going to have zero tariffs. We'll have no problem for us trading with you. Impose whatever tariffs you want." And then the US would say, "Well, we'll impose rather lower tariffs on the Vietnamese than we will on other countries." But I think Vietnam could be the role model for free trading, free market countries. I think in how to respond.
Yes. Do you think the UK has done okay in our way of perhaps contrasted with the EU? Of course, I mean we've very much tried to sort of butter up Trump. We got an early deal, although we're still waiting to see if that deal actually materialises with Trump. As you say, you're always waiting for the next social media post. Do you think the UK's strategy has worked in the end, Harry?
It's as good as it could be. I mean, I think we could have got. I think, so far as I understand it, the Vietnamese have gone further than us by just saying, "Look, we'll just have zero tariff, zero quotas." We haven't gone quite as far as that. But our general approach of saying, "Let's just get the best deal we can," and taking advantage of Brexit, that we've got, we're feet of foot. We've got that independence that we're able to do that very rapidly. Has been sensible. I mean, what in a way I wonder is if the attention should focus on our trade with other countries, and they're saying, right, we're going to anything that we don't produce ourselves, we're going to immediately have zero tariffs on. We'll have mutual recognition of all advanced economies. There's all these examples, aren't there, about our tomatoes could be cheaper if we scrap the tariffs on Morocco, and I mean there are countless small examples which cumulatively would be economically significant of where it would just be clear common sense for us to scrap a lot of tariffs. And in a way, I think that we shouldn't get the rest of the world shouldn't get preoccupied with the United States. We should probably be looking at how we could be bolder with trading with each other, and the European Union could certainly, they're still in a bit of a huff about Brexit, aren't they? Of being sort of political in terms of some of the vexatious barriers they've got to trading with the UK. I mean they should probably get over that and think, right, look, we need to maximise trading opportunities on our doorstep.
Well, let's stay with the US, but widen it out a little bit from the trade policy. The global economy is entering uncharted waters. Already rattled by geopolitical tensions and rapid technological change, it now faces fresh turbulence from policy volatility in the United States, the world's economic anchor. Two visions dominate the horizon. One sees America following a painful but ultimately constructive path of restructuring, perhaps recalling the Reagan and Thatcher years, with reduced debt and a revitalised private sector. The other warns of a drift towards stagflation and instability reminiscent of the Carter era. Either way, the effects will echo far beyond US shores. The question for Britain and others is how to prepare for an age of economic volatility. Dominic, I mean, which way do you think things are going to go in the US? We've been talking about it. We're living in these very uncertain times. Do you think there is a path for the Trump administration through a sort of rocky road to end up with reform and growth and sort of ready for an AI-powered future? Or is the United States heading towards unaffordable debt and stagflation, and perhaps the big beautiful bill with all its extra government spending in it, which has just passed, is a sign of the future?
First thing I'd say is, the global economy is always in uncharted waters, and that's a good thing because we don't want to go backwards to things that we've already had. For most of world history, people were very poor. The innovation and changes that have happened since the mid 1800s have been the greatest thing to ever happen to human beings. In terms of preparing for that, Yeah, I think there is I think there absolutely is a way. Obviously, people on this podcast, we would love to see a return to Reaganite, Thatcherite ideas about the size of government and about the role of the private sector. The big beautiful bill, I give it like a 5 out of 10. Not good. That's not a good grade, but it is better than most things that come out of Congress. We got to keep that in mind. They did do significant reforms on Medicaid. I mean, this is the largest welfare spending reform in American history. So despite all of the problems with the bill, and there are many, and I agree with a lot of criticisms of it, it does include that. It did include a pretty significant rollback of a lot of the green energy tax credits and green energy industrial policy that we saw from the previous administration. Again, it was insufficient. I would have liked to see just a total repeal of that stuff, but it was a significant cutback on it, and I don't think we're going to see very much in the way of political consequences for politicians who did that. Right? Democrats are making a very big deal right now about how these Congressional Budget Office projections that say that millions of people are going to lose health insurance coverage. I'm skeptical of those estimates. They've been wrong about that in the past, and it's not because they're politically biased or whatever. It's just because it's a really hard thing to estimate. But it's a simple matter that Medicaid right now currently has millions of people enrolled in it who are not eligible for it. A small amount of that is because they're illegal immigrants, and states have made it available for illegal immigrants. That's everyone should be against that. But the other thing is, lots of people who were born here have incomes that are too high to be eligible for the program, and yet they're enrolled in it anyway. We should at least be able to say that, regardless of what you think about what the rules should be for Medicaid, if people aren't following the rules right now, they shouldn't be allowed to take it. And that's a lot of what the Republican bill does. It also reforms the way that state governments can basically rip off the federal government by inventing fake spending on Medicaid, and then claiming that to get federal matching funds. That opens up a really good question about federalism and about fiscal federalism in the United States. So, like, what's the role of state governments? What's the role of the federal government? That's a long overdue conversation. It's still insufficient right now, but at least we're getting started on talking about that. And I would like to see states take a lot more responsibility for this stuff, and the federal government take less. To the extent that the federal government funds this at all, it should just be with block grants, and states can kind of do what they want with it, rather than having all of these strings attached with the federal money. There's all sorts of ways that this could go, and I think the one big beautiful bill, which is ridiculous we have to call it that, but that is what it's called. It actually opens up an opportunity to have some of those conversations. Will we actually do it? That is very open for debate. But there absolutely is an opportunity for it, and I think it's important that we, when we're talking about it, and leaders in Washington, they actually take this opportunity that's been given.
There are lots of people who worry about the Trump presidency, its sort of imperial tendencies, and the damaging things he's doing to world trade and so forth. But we're very envious from the UK of what's happened with growth in the US over the last, particularly the last sort of 10, 20 years or so, which is sort of vastly better than what's happened in the UK. Do you think that Trump is unlikely to change that trajectory, that still the economic outlook for the US remains strong, perhaps because you have a system with checks and balances that can keep even a Donald Trump in some sort of control?
One of the really encouraging things about the United States and about the economy was during Trump's first term, he really hated the tech companies. He hated Facebook. He thought that Facebook was in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and they made it hard for him to win the election, and so on. If you had invested $1,000 in Facebook on day one of his presidency, you would have about doubled your money by the time you're done. we saw the same thing happen with Joe Biden. Joe Biden hates the oil companies. He talked about how terrible oil companies were. He wanted to tax them extra. He wanted all of these regulations and stuff to punish the evil, greedy oil companies. Well, again, if you had invested money in ExxonMobil or Chevron or something like that at the beginning of his presidency, you would have almost doubled your money by the time he was done. It's a great thing in the United States that you can invest money in an industry that the president hates and double your money. That's a wonderful thing. That means, despite all the rest of this, despite all the rest of problems, and they're very, very real, and I talk about them all the time. I write about them for National Review. But despite all those problems, it is still possible to have an economy that's independent of politics and to have economic performance that is not based on the favoritism of politicians. One of the big things, that's one of the big problems with tariffs is that they go the other direction on that. They make it so that your success is contingent on whether you have favor in Washington. If Trump's tariffs are allowed to go into effect to the extent that he wants them to, that will be a significant setback on that. Like I said before, I don't think they will be. I think some sort of limited form of this will go into effect that will have damaging consequences, but I don't think it will be enough to really change the trajectory of United States economic growth. The big thing that I think that's looming in the background on this, though, is, of course, the national debt. The Republican tax bill did not do anything to change the overall trajectory of the national debt. Like I said, it made some consequential reforms in some specific areas, but overall the trajectory of the debt is basically the same because entitlement spending on Social Security and on Medicare is basically the same. That is the elephant in the room. That is the big thing that's looming. Some kind of fiscal crisis on the horizon. That could cause a problem. I don't know when that's going to happen, and neither does anyone else. But I don't think that Donald Trump is the reason for that, right? These are long-running problems that we've had for decades under administrations of both parties. And as much as Trump's buffoonery is offensive to me, as for many of the reasons that Harry mentioned about how arbitrary and capricious it is, the ultimate overall effect, I think, will end up not being nearly as great as many people fear, because we still do, despite government's best efforts, we still do have a free market in this country.
Harry, an economy divorced from politics or independent from politics sounds like a good thing to me. I imagine to you too. But of course, we have Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer running things in the UK, who came into power promising to bring the state to bear as a sort of mission-led economy, that they were going to drive growth. That doesn't seem to be going so well. Do you think there are lessons that we can learn from the US, or are we going to have to wait for another administration to make any moves in that direction?
Mark, you mentioned us being envious, listening to Dominic, and I think that I mean, putting it mildly, really, isn't it? They're saying, right, okay, well, look, we want to be more rigorous about welfare spending and health spending, and well, energy, we want to have a we want to have a greater supply of energy. We want abundant, cheap energy, and some of these things some of these problems we've had in the UK that have so constrained our economy. And the Americans have been richer than us for a while, but the gap has really sharply increased. And so no, definitely there are lessons there. And I mean, and one of the things that's annoying about we were discussing earlier about tariffs is that obviously is a negative thing, but in terms of trying to measure it, it's hard, because there are other things that are happening that are absolutely positive in the United States. And I think that one thing that I sense that will be better in Donald Trump's second term than before, that at least there's some attention made to state spending. I know that we had Elon Musk falling out with Donald Trump, and so there's a general thing of saying Doge has been a failure. I'm not sure it's been a complete failure. You know, you aim to try and save $1 trillion or two, and then you end up with maybe 100 billion, 200 billion. It's better than a poke in the eye with a burnt stick. There needs to be at least there's some kind of interest in seeing if they can make some savings in spending and deregulation, low tax, wanting to keep down energy bills. There's lots of positive things that that the United States is doing in terms of economic growth, and lots of positive examples around the rest of the world, aren't there? I mean, in terms of trying to eradicate poverty, the significance of India's growth rate, India right at the top of the economic league, sort of 5%, 6% growth, and that boring statistic. But the impact that has on millions and millions and millions of people in terms of whether they're getting enough to eat or not. Argentina, I mean, the turnaround in Argentina from a couple of years ago being a disaster, and Argentina's right up at the top, and there's no ambiguity there. There's no quarrelling about whatever you think about it. Clearly, Argentina is going for a radical free market approach, and that will be judged on that in terms of what it achieves in terms of general living standards, reduction in poverty, inflation, borrowing, and it's shaping up to be quite a good success story. So if from a free market perspective, Donald Trump is a confusing person to look at, there are probably other places in the world that we can look at for more conclusive results.
Yes, well, we've been talking here and there about unaffordable spending. So let's turn for our final segment to unaffordable welfare spending in the UK. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch warns that Britain risks becoming a welfare state with an economy attached, with 28 million people now supporting 20 million others through wages and taxes. In a speech last week, she likened welfare to a trampoline, something that cushions a fall but should help people bounce back. It's a vision that pairs compassion with economic realism. But the challenge now is to turn that vision into policy, rethinking support for the disabled, rebalancing incentives, and designing a system that rewards work and safeguards Britain's long-term prosperity. Now, Harry, this is Kemi Badenoch aiming squarely at a weak point that has opened up for Labour after their complete failure to get through the minor welfare reforms that they were trying to make. Do you think this is something that can be an opportunity for the Conservatives, where they can show themselves to be the sort of the grown-ups in the room with plans for actually the reform that we need?
I think it's a huge opportunity for the Conservatives. I voted for Kemi Badenoch to become the Conservative leader. She's had lots of criticism, I think mostly unfair, because the difficulties that the Conservatives have got into, I don't think are her fault. But I think when I was voting for her, this is very much the type of speech that I was looking forward to hearing from, a sort of policy agenda that I was looking forward to getting from her. And because Reform UK have made a big mistake saying that they want increased welfare spending, in terms of saying that we'll remove the 2-child cap on the amount of extra welfare you get for having more children, and the Labour government have made very half-hearted attempts to try to just sort of reduce the scale of increase in welfare spending, and even that has been rebuffed. So anybody who's remotely interested in accepting economic reality, the Conservatives are the only game in town. So that's an opportunity and responsibility for Kemi Badenoch. I mean, I think it obviously, but it's always important to stress that even if we weren't facing national bankruptcy, even if the public finances weren't in a dire state, which they are, it's a good thing for people to work where they can, rather than to be stuck at home on welfare. It's the natural state, a healthy state, is for people who are able to work to do so. That's how we gain fulfillment, and that's so there's a very strong moral case for reforming the welfare system to allow that to be the norm. So I hope very much that Kemi Badenoch will really keep pushing this issue strongly, and it might be difficult and tough message, but I hope that it will bring some electoral success for her in due course.
Dominic, you've been talking a little about the entitlement problems in the US, that they have got some reforms through in the new big, beautiful bill, if we can keep calling it that ridiculous name, but that the looming crisis of affordability is still there and remains to be dealt with. Do you think there's any political appetite in sight for anyone to tackle that, or in the US version of what we're seeing in the UK? Are you going to have things get rather worse before that political appetite to take on the problem properly really takes hold?
Yeah, it's probably got to get worse before it gets better. The case that I've been trying to make is that and I just did this with the Fourth of July, Independence Day, and the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. As Americans, we have an answer to what the purpose of government is. The purpose of government is to secure our rights. Our rights come from God, and they're supposed to be secured and protected by the government. And if you look at the federal budget right now, the purpose of government in the United States is to subsidize the consumption of retirees. That is what the biggest expenses in our government budget are, and that is contributing to now the third largest expense, larger than the military, which is interest payments. Interest payments on the debt is now the third largest category of federal spending. So that's about, I think, 11% of federal spending right now is just to finance other federal spending. And that is projected to continue to increase and grow because of the debts primarily being incurred through the retirement programs, Social Security, and Medicare. Medicare right now, premiums that seniors pay for Medicare only cover 15% of the costs of the program. The payroll tax, that is the dedicated funding mechanism for the program, covers 35% of the costs. So 50% of the costs are just being incurred by other parts of the government and by borrowing. Social Security, the real benefit that seniors have gotten. It's very common to talk about this as a sacred trust in the United States. This idea that seniors paid into this program and we need to give them back what they got. The real average monthly benefit since the year 2000 has increased by almost 40%. That is adjusted for inflation. It has increased by almost 40%. If we could go back to the sacred trust of 2000, we wouldn't have this problem. But we still do because the benefit keeps increasing and the number of workers paying into it is declining relative to the number of seniors who are taking out. We know how these problems work. These problems have been around for decades, and yet politicians have largely refused to solve them, and voters have largely refused to punish politicians for not solving them. Eventually, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. But that is the issue, and I hope we can kind of make an appeal to the principles of the founding of this country, which are that the government is supposed to secure your rights, and then the basic principles building off of that we saw in the 20th century from leaders like Ronald Reagan, which says government's supposed to be a hand up and not a handout. And what we're seeing right now is seniors, especially, who are on average the wealthiest generation, being on the receiving end of now trillions of federal dollars, in many cases that they don't even need. And that is causing a lot of these issues. So I hope that I hope the U.S. can have that conversation and do so in a more serious way. We don't have the leadership to make that happen right now. I don't think I'm hiding the ball there by saying that. But I do think that there is still some faith, I think, in the American idea and the American spirit, which says that that government is not supposed to be the source to your livelihood. And the fact that we just saw the largest welfare reform in American history pass, it was larger than most people thought. When the original budget instructions came during the reconciliation process back in February, people thought that the Medicaid spending projection cuts would be something like $800 billion. They ended up being closer to $1 trillion. So it is possible to have welfare reform and to vote to reduce projected spending on that while still maintaining your seat. I don't think, like I said before, I don't think hardly any politicians are going to lose a seat over that decision. And I'm hoping that will open people's eyes a little bit to say, you know what, this stuff isn't untouchable actually. And if we don't touch it, it's going to get worse, and people are really going to hate us when the inevitable crisis happens.
Well, nice to end on that optimistic note, and certainly people listening in the UK will find a lot familiar in that US story, particularly around the unaffordability of pension benefits. And here we have the triple lock on pensions, which has cost so far 3 times as much as was planned, and is helping to make the state pension here increasingly unaffordable. We're going to have to leave it there. But Harry Phibbs and Dominic Pino, thank you both very much. And make sure you're subscribed to our daily email briefings. Go to capx.co, that's capx.co. I'm Marc Sidwell. Goodbye.